You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to a very special edition of the Today's Media podcast. This is a combination of the usual Today's Conveyancer, Today's Wills and Probate, and Today's Family Lawyer podcast, and it's a special edition as part of Mental Health Awareness Week. We have the start of a bad joke coming here because I actually have on the podcast with me today a conveyancer, a wills and probate practitioner, and a family lawyer. We're not in a bar, though. It would be quite nice to be in a bar, I think, but we're not in a bar. And today, the conversation is all about the stresses and strains of being a lawyer. We know that working in the law is a challenging profession, but each of your individual disciplines, no doubt, brings various different challenges. So that's what I really kind of want to get into the discussion today. With me, I have Laura Burkinshaw, Michael Culver and Marc Etherington. I'm going to let you guys do your own introductions, please. So, Marc, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Yes, thank you, David. So my name's Marc Etherington. I'm a legal director at Rayden Solicitors. So I am a family lawyer. Rayden Solicitors, we specialise solely in family law. I'm based at the firm's Hampstead office in London. And I also sit on Resolution's National Committee and also the Wellbeing Committee as well.
Thank you, Marc. Laura.
I'm Laura Burkinshaw. I'm a legal director at Convey Law. We specialise in just conveyancing. I'm also lucky enough to sit on the board of the Society of Licensed Conveyancers. I'm the deputy chair there, and I'm also a trustee of the Conveyancing Foundation.
And Michael.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael Culver. I'm the managing director of the imaginatively named Culver Law Limited, and we're a niche private client law firm with offices in central London and Cambridge. And I'm also the chairman of the Association of Lifetime Lawyers, which used to be known as Solicitors for the Elderly.
Great, thanks very much indeed for the introduction. So let's dive right into it. The podcast is about mental health and well-being. We all know that life in law is stressful, and perhaps you wouldn't mind sharing some initial thoughts about the stresses that you have in the role. As I say, my gut here is that you're all going to be stressed, but in slightly different ways. Marc, perhaps you wouldn't mind going first.
From my point of view, in the world of family law, it's a very personal area that I have to deal with. So when I act for clients, going through a divorce, separation, or dealing with issues surrounding your children, it's often described to me as the most traumatic experience that they're going through in their entire lives. And actually, some clients have even said to me it's parallel to a bereavement, a serious bereavement within the family. And so as a family lawyer, you are dealing with a lot of negative energy that's coming your way constantly from different clients on different cases. And whilst I'm a lawyer, and I'm there to advise on the law and how it applies, it's very easy for clients to come to me and expect me to be a therapist or a counsellor and to provide that emotional support as well. And so that's where it's key from my perspective to make sure that I'm able to make sure there's the right team around the client, whether that is legal advice, financial advice, but also that well-being, emotional support as well. And yeah, when clients go through these really difficult experiences, you do see the worst in people as well. It's pretty hard. And that's why certainly in family law, we've had this challenge where we've had some really good professionals leave the profession in our area of work because it is so intense and it just proves too much for some people. So yeah, from a family law perspective, that's certainly the kind of challenges we face in the work that we do.
I can't remember what the top 5 most stressful experiences in life are, but I know moving home, death and divorce are on that list, aren't they? So we're well represented today. Laura and Michael, I see you both nodding along. Laura, a lot of conveyancers have left the profession as well, haven't they, recently?
Yeah, actually, and a lot of what Marc said, we echo in conveyancing. Quite often we tend to walk parallel to the journey that a lot of Marc's clients are on. You know, we tend to be the people who are either stopping them perhaps being able to complete their transaction because we're not moving forward with their house sale or their transfer of equity or the like. I mean, on the plus, we also get to be on the other side of a very exciting move. But as Marc said, it's very, very difficult to distance yourself from the sheer emotion that those clients bring in to the transaction. And I certainly have noticed the younger staff, especially those who perhaps haven't bought a house before, they struggle to empathise with their clients, or you find the ones who empathise too much and they struggle to distance themselves, that it is for us a transaction, and finding those fine boundaries between them. But it really is a very difficult, or can be a very difficult time for clients and the staff during those transactions.
From a wills and probate perspective, Michael, I guess probably not too dissimilar to what Marc said about divorce being parallel to bereavement. You know, you're going through things. It's a really difficult time of life, and also trying to convince people to write a will or need an LPA.
It is, and really, like Marc said, you tend to turn into a bit of a counsellor for a lot of these clients. I mean, they are often going through a bereavement, or if they're not going for a bereavement, then we're talking about death and we're planning for death, and we're focusing on where we're all going to end up ultimately on a daily basis, and it is an emotional area. You regularly have clients in floods of tears on the phone or in the office or on Zoom or whatnot, and you're helping guide them through that, and it is a very emotional role, and it is hard to distance yourself from that emotion sometimes. And lifetime lawyers, we focus a lot on what we call soft skills or kind of client handling skills, and getting our lawyers into a kind of way of dealing with that, and trying to be emotive, of course, and handle clients in the best way and get the best for them, but at the same time trying to move on from that kind of when you can, when it comes to focusing on your own life and whatnot. And the other thing that we'll all probably face is if someone's getting divorced, or someone's died and we're dealing with an estate, or there's a dispute over the estate, or if someone's moving house, it's the most important thing in their world at that moment. So there's a lot of pressure from them that gets put onto the lawyer. They want it sorted. They want this problem done and dusted. And in the kind of modern world that we live in, it's so easy to contact your lawyer or to plague your solicitor with WhatsApp messages or text messages or stalk them on LinkedIn, or let alone email, phone, etc. So there's kind of no getting away from it sometimes. And I think, the big problem that we probably all face is switching off and not taking that kind of emotion home with you.
I want to come back to switching off in just a second, but you talked there about developing soft skills with people. There's a big movement in family at the moment around collaborative law, and Marc referenced the fact that we want to get the right people around the client. Conveyancing feels a little bit behind that curve, Laura.
I'm not sure it is. I think it depends on the practice you're in, if I'm honest, David. We spend a lot of time training our staff in the soft skills. As Michael rightly said, we spend so much time with these clients, whether it is in person, on the phone, by email. Tone is awful by email, you can't tell. Client portals. It's one of the things that I think in conveyancing almost became a lost art when we stopped seeing clients face to face as much. So we spend a lot of time in our first few weeks that we have, especially a new member of staff. They have an enrolment period of 3 weeks where they have a lot of intensive soft skill training, whether that is your tone in your emails, your telephone voice, how to de-escalate a client. I found, especially with some of the newer members, and I don't know if the rest of you have found this, is they have no idea how to start an email even. You know, it's not a text and it's not a voice note, which everyone now seems to be doing. So we do spend a lot of time instilling the importance of client care. And we have a pilot call at the very beginning with all of our clients in which we try and assess the needs of that specific client. So it may well be all of their correspondences by phone or all by email, or perhaps all in a very different way of corresponding with them, because you do have to really think about each client as an individual person and what is going to meet their needs.
Marc, very briefly, perhaps give us a synopsis of the benefits that collaborative law provides in this context.
Yeah, so well, firstly, just addressing Laura's point, I still think family law's got a long way to go to try and provide a positive working environment for those that work in that area of the law. I think we are making strides, but it's a long-term game effectively to try and get there. In terms of collaborative law, just to explain to those who don't know what collaborative law is, the idea is that rather it being us against them, let's say husband and his lawyer against wife and her lawyer, the idea is about you're working as a team. So it's not us and them, it's about working together with the joint goal of doing what's best for the family. And when you do collaborative law strictly, the idea is that you both commit, or all four parties commit to say, we are going to resolve this without going to court. And if we fail in that objective, you, the parties, have to de-instruct your solicitors and go elsewhere. So effectively, it's a commitment by the lawyers to say, we believe in you two, we believe you can sort this out, and we believe that so strongly that we're prepared to effectively maybe lose work from it by knowing that if it all breaks down, you have to instruct somebody else. And so you all get into the same room, you have those discussions, and it's about working together very much. And it's a great way to work. And I get very frustrated why that approach is just not adopted on a more regular basis, because inevitably, actually, parents, husbands and wife, same-sex couples, they want the same thing. They just want something that's fair, but that often gets lost in the emotion of the situation they are in. And sometimes it's, common sense goes out the window. It is actually the emotion that's taken over everything. And that's why I often say to a client sometimes, I don't think you're ready to start the legal process yet. I think you need to step back, make sure you're okay, make sure your mindset's right, and then come and deal with the legal process, because you're more likely to do it in a better, more amicable way.
That's something quite specific to family, isn't it? That we're talking about the mental health and well-being of the lawyer, but actually there's an element to this that the client has to be in the right frame of mind in order to be able to progress. Their mental health and well-being has to be considered. Is that something that you take into your practice, Michael?
Oh yeah, for sure. We do contentious probate as well, and similar to what Marc was saying there, the client starts in such an emotional state, and we have to kind of apply a kind of commercial reality to it as well with them a lot of the time. So, the kind of old chestnut of let's fight over every single little aspect, and every single word that they say is wrong and incorrect, and it's a case of kind of encouraging them to kind of pick their battles as well, really. And to what extent do we fight this? To what extent do we challenge it? And when do we? And how far do we take it? And often, it takes people. Everyone's different, as Laura was saying earlier. It takes some people a long time to get over a bereavement, and then when there is a sense of injustice, they can fight kind of forevermore on it. And you as the lawyer, kind of dealing with that, you waste a kind of a lot of energy because you want to do the best you can for them, but at the same time you've got to rein in their expectations a little bit and keep them kind of in check, that and almost put yourself in a almost like a parental position, I guess, in many ways, because you've got to say to them, look, this just isn't worth pursuing, and you're going after something that you're not going to achieve. You're going to waste a lot of money. You're going to be very, very stressed. You're going to be very unhappy down the line. And that is often the biggest battle that we as lawyers face, is getting clients to take the advice that they're paying for.
Which kind of neatly leads into your own mental health and well-being. And coming back to what you said, Michael, about switching off and the ability to switch off, or the ability to switch perhaps even from case to case, a challenge that you recognise?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've been guilty of taking work home with me and letting kind of work stress impact on my own personal life. I'm sure we've all had that, where we feel like we have to work every single hour that's available, or you're waking up in the night in a panic about something you did or didn't do. And the other thing that I find that I've done a lot throughout my career is just being really, really self-critical and expecting perfection at like all times. And the slightest thing that's gone wrong, you can kind of blow out of all proportion and make it a bit of a disaster, and not kind of forgive yourself for it. I mean, ultimately, we're human. We are going to make mistakes on occasion. And I think it's often kind of how we react to that mistake and what we learn from it, which is kind of what makes us grow and get better as lawyers. But it's easy to sit here and say this now, but when you're going through it, it's very, very difficult.
There's a difference between you owning the business and having the business pressures as well as the legal pressures. But you've been nodding along to most of that as well, Laura. Again, something that you recognise in conveyancing.
Yes, definitely. It's exactly the same. I think it is very difficult to separate yourself from the emotions that the client has brought to you within the day. What Michael said about us taking things home and taking it personally, more years ago than I care to remember, when I was a trainee and first learning, I used to keep a piece of paper, pad of paper beside the bed. So in the middle of the night, you used to wake up panicking and make a note. It does come home with you, and it's very difficult, I find, to separate your emotions from there. And we've worked really hard with our staff to try and create a day structure for them to follow so that they can have that time to switch off, because it's so important for people to be able to sleep and to be able to have that downtime to come back the next day feeling refreshed, even if they are being self-critical, like Michael said. You need to be able to draw a line under it and come back the next day much better. We have employed a counsellor within our office. He actually attends our office, and our staff make appointments with him. And we found that really helps, because even if they just want to rant and rave about a specific file they have, or whether it's external to our work environment, as we all know, that does impact your day to day when you've got something going on at home. And conversely, the other way round, we don't want our clients to impact our staff's lives and them take it home with them. That's something we really feel strongly at Convey Law. We have mental health first aiders. We have about 10 mental health first aiders throughout the office, and they're trained to look at the signs of when someone is starting to struggle, and not to counsel them, because obviously that isn't their job, but to recognise the signs and point them in the right direction. I think a lot of businesses are moving towards that way and really looking after their staff and learning the pressure points and how to identify that very, very early. We've noticed that as soon as our conveyancers move off their dedicated daily tasks, you can see it straight away. They may get a complaint, or you can see they're not hitting perhaps the right amount of exchanges. It's quite quick to be able to identify. And we found if we sit those people down and get them to reassess their day, we can quickly get them back into being in a really good place.
You said about drawing a line under it and starting the next day afresh. I mean, that's not always easy to do, is it, Marc?
No, certainly not. And look, I've been very vocal on wellbeing mental health probably since 2018, really, through my work at Resolution, but even myself. So basically at the start of 2023, I was actually signed off work for a month due to burnout, and it was also stress and anxiety. So probably in 21 and 22, I had a bereavement in the family. My parents were trying to move house with my grandparents at the same time, and that was trying to deal with that situation. I had some damage caused to my property, which we found out the garage was not insured. We then got a builder to try and sort it out, but the builder was effectively one of those cowboy builders. We lost a significant sum of money as a consequence of that to rectify the situation. And alongside all that, I had my busy caseload as well, and trying to deal with that. So literally, there was no space for me personally to have time to myself to recharge. It was just negative energy, news constantly. And I always thought to myself, oh, I'm talking about well-being a lot. It can't happen to me, but it did. And certainly, I think not getting the right amount of sleep, not eating well, the boundaries I set myself previously, they dropped, and I was really, really unwell, Quite, and I have to say, talk about how traumatic it is to get a divorce or something like that, but if you are mentally unwell, it's pretty bad. And unless you've been through that experience, it's very difficult to explain it. But the couple of examples I give is, so whilst I was signed off work, my mum, I went to stay with my mum and dad for a week because I've got young children and I just couldn't be around them to look after myself. I was asked to buy a pack of grapes from Marks and Spencer's. It took me like more than 30 minutes to actually be able to complete that task. Not sleeping at night. So there was a couple of nights where I was literally awake for like 24, 48 hours. And then during the first week I was signed off, I actually said to my mum, I said, oh, what's the point of being here, kind of thing. And I didn't try and do anything, but it was just, I was so down and so negative in that moment that's what I said. So for me to say that to my own mother, she must have found that very scary to hear and very worrying, because I remember she called my dad and she said, can you please get home as soon as possible? So yeah, those are the kind of things really that what can happen, where it's like a light switch. It was just, I was a different person for about 3.5 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. And it was really hard. So certainly my message to anyone listening is it can happen to anybody. And actually what's really surprising, having gone through that experience, and this may apply to private client and conveyancing as well, is that it does happen to a lot of people more than you realise. And people have got in touch with me saying, oh, Marc, this happened to me, but they've just not spoken about it before. I think as a profession, a lot of people have been quite private and prepared just to brush it under the carpet. Maybe it's a sign of weakness, but I think we've got to talk about it. And it's great, like this podcast, for example, that we are able to talk about it, because we need to change the culture across the profession. And so I've tried to turn a negative into a positive. But yeah, look, if you are listening and you have gone through a tough time, or you are going through a tough time at the moment, it's okay. It's okay. Just said, learn from it and make sure you get the right help to support you as well.
Thank you for your honesty as well, Marc. It's an incredible story, and we're privileged that you've shared that on the podcast. Thank you. It was the analogy between physical health and mental health that really helped me start to get my head around this, that we look after our bodies, that I play football on a Monday night once a week, and I really enjoy it, and we practice, but we don't always invest that time in our mental health. You talked about the need for personal space to recharge. I mean, crikey, how many of us actually achieve that on a regular basis? And this is one of the things I really wanted to cover in the podcast, is what practical things we can do to help ourselves. What are the signs of poor mental health, and what can we do to address that, Michael?
So in terms of things we can do to help ourselves, as you know, I've got a lot of thoughts on this. I'm always putting stuff on LinkedIn. I probably drive people crazy about my kind of thoughts on this. But the number one for me is healthy body equals a healthy mind. I think if we can keep our body fit and healthy, it just generally makes things feel better. And I think it can be preemptive as well. Like whether you're going through a stressful time or not, looking after yourself is going to generally make you feel better all round. But I also think it can be a very good way to react to stress. If you are stressed, I think going for a run or a walk or a cycle or a swim, whatever your choice may be, can really, really help bring you out of it. And prior to 2019, or 2020, I should say, when the world went into lockdown and I was in the office on a regular basis, I used to run home from work every single day. I would run home from work, and it was only maybe 1.5 miles from my office to the station, and about the same again at the other end. But I'd get my trainers on, whether I felt like it or not, I would plod to the train station. And by the time I got there, I felt 1,000 times better about how work was going, what I dealt with during that day. Just that short little run, I felt 1,000 times better by the time I got on the train. Then you sit on the train and you maybe look at some emails and some of the stress comes back, and then I ran at the other end. And again, by the time I got to my front door and I'm home, it was like it had gone, it had shifted. Now, of course, lockdown happened, and you know, the world's now we're all working flexibly and everything else, so it's not perhaps quite so easy to do something like that. But I think generally the point remains is if you can do something physical, or even just getting out and moving. I mean, just going for a walk. All right, it's really tough in practice when everything's piling on top of you. You've got tons of stuff to sort out and you've got limited time. But sometimes I think we can be more productive by giving ourselves a little bit of kindness, giving ourselves a few minutes to just get ready to dive into that. And if you are feeling stressed and overwhelmed, I think just taking a step back for a few minutes can make you so much more productive. And I'd say I think walking's a really good one. You know, if kind of cardio isn't your thing, lift some weights, throw some weights around, stretching, yoga, you know, it all really helps. One thing that I do, if I feel like I'm short on time, but I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed and stressed, I just drop and do press-ups. Now, my office think I'm insane anyway. I think I'm very eccentric, but that just really helps. Just doing like 5, 10, 20 press-ups, and I feel great by the time I stand back up. And it's like, you know what? I've just dealt with that stress. I'm now ready to move on. The other thing with kind of healthy body side of things is people stress eat, especially with flexible working and working from home, and the kitchen's right there, and the biscuits are in the cupboard or whatever. To just, I'm feeling stressed, I'm going to eat, you know, and it's kind of breaking that habit is so hard. The other side of it, of course, is drinking as well, the stress drinking that can come into it. And I just need a beer or a glass of wine to unwind. That can be obviously a really slippery slope and just get worse and worse. And I don't want to preach on this too much because I actually decided about 5 years ago that I just wasn't going to drink anymore because I just had to stop it. I wasn't an alcoholic or even close. I very rarely drank at home, but I would binge drink, and I would go out after a stressful day at work and I'd maybe have a few drinks. And I feel like that was my way of getting rid of the stress, but it's such an unhealthy response to it. I think it makes you kind of overthink a lot of stuff, and maybe you say things after a couple of drinks to colleagues that you might not have said otherwise. And, you know, things like this can happen. That's kind of a big no-no for me, is just kind of, if you can shift away from that, get away from the stress eating and focus on keeping your body healthy, I think it's really going to help when it comes to your mind and your thought process.
We don't all have to run Ironmans though, Michael, do we?
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's why I say the walking, the stretching, the yoga, things like that. Getting into fitness is quite a tough thing to do if you're not used to it. If you've not made it a habit, getting into starting to do something on a regular basis is quite challenging. One of the things that helped me when I started out on my fitness kind of journey, if you like, was I just signed up for an event. I just found something that I quite liked the look of, which I knew was going to challenge me, and I signed up. And then I told the world I was going to do it. I put it on LinkedIn, I put it on Facebook, I put it on every form of social media. I told everyone I was doing this, because then you've got so many people who hold you to account to it. And so you almost feel when you're approaching the event, I've got to do this. I can't back out of this. You know, I'm going to let so many people down. I've made such a big deal of it that I've got to do this. And that in itself can become a little bit stressful. But the act of training or working for a particular reason can help make it a habit. And for me, that's something that's kind of been a journey over a good few years. But now exercise is just a habit, and it's part of what I do on a daily basis to help me manage my stress. And I prioritize it, because I know if I'm not exercising or I'm not looking after myself, I'm not going to be as productive. I'm not going to be as good at handling things that when they come up in the working day. So I make it a priority.
Laura, you've got some really good initiatives in the firm. And Michael's made a great point there that, you know, we've got to prioritize this, not just in work, but outside of work as well. Yeah.
I think, you know, I'm not going to be doing an Ironman anytime soon, or, you know, half a one. But I do think Michael is right. And it's one of the things that I must say I've really struggled at, you know, with over the last 20 years or so that I've been conveyancing, that of finding that, or forcing myself to prioritize, to find the time to do something that I know will improve my own health, whether it is, you know, physical or mental or both, because I thoroughly believe that they are joined. I've got 2 young children, and it can become quite difficult to set that time aside to take care of yourself. It's probably the biggest struggle I have, is not feeling guilty when I put myself first. And I really suffer from mum guilt when I do that, or guilt that I haven't finished something in work, and then that in turn then makes me feel guilty if I set time aside at home, because then I get the mum guilt again, and it becomes a vicious circle. On the days I work from home, I make sure that I do walk at lunchtime, you know, whether it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It has been extremely difficult this year with the weather, and I've suffered more this year in the downs, I think, because we haven't been able to get outside as much because it has just poured. But it has made a difference to how I feel. We're not getting as much vitamin D because we're not getting outside as much. And you don't have that natural lift if you're not being able to get outside and have that fresh air. I am a football mum, so luckily or unluckily, I do spend most Sunday mornings outside, wet or not. But I have found that getting myself and the kids out watching football, I've got that half an hour, whatever they are playing for, out in the fresh air. Sometimes I'll walk around the pitch so that I'm not necessarily standing still, and I get that little bit of a boost of endorphins, you know, like Michael was talking about. But it really is hard, I think, for everyone now to find themselves important enough to prioritise themselves for even 5 minutes a day. And I don't have a magic answer to it, and I wish I had the dedication that Michael had. After each of my children, I actually ran half a marathon, but that was more because I let myself enjoy pregnancy, shall we say. And I agree with him. I did that for the purpose of, I signed up, I told everyone I was doing this half marathon, and you have that goal, and it made me go out running a certain amount of times a week. But I've let that slip, you know, because I then automatically think, oh, I've got time. And it's a shame, isn't it, that we do stop prioritising ourselves and how important it is to look after ourselves.
I sense part of your story, Marc, is around the fact that you just simply didn't prioritise yourself at that point in time. I know you've got a young family as well, for example.
Yeah, and like what Laura said, I can completely relate to that. I had that guilt as well. And I think I started working silly hours because I was worried about my work eating into my time with my children. And it was just completely the wrong way to approach it. I think I've learned from my experience as well, kind of working very late or working very early in the morning. It just doesn't work for me. I am a morning person. So when I'm in the office, I like to get in the office about 7:45. So I've got that hour and 15 to myself before the office officially opens. But I was doing really silly hours and I was just not getting enough sleep from it. And then what Michael talks about in terms of exercise, so I do exercise. I go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week. Just before I was ill, I had an injury. I stopped exercising. I think that had an impact as well. But look, exercise isn't for everyone. Yes, walking's a very simple way to get exercise, but I think it's just doing something that's going to take your mind off work. So when I was off ill, I found Lego very therapeutic. So I'm a big Star Wars fan. So I've got some Star Wars Lego. And because you're focusing on something else and not about work, that makes a huge difference. So if you're in the gym and you're lifting some weights, you're thinking, oh God, I've got to lift this up. I don't want it to come smashing down on my face. So you're thinking about that. If you're doing Lego, you're trying to put all the pieces together. If you're watching your children play football, you're focusing on that and supporting them. So it's really important that you do something for yourself, and you have got to be selfish. You've got to put yourself first. And even if it's just an hour or 2 a week, ideally more, but only a couple of hours, whatever you enjoy doing, riding a bike, whatever, reading, cooking, put that time aside to make sure you do that every single week, because you've got to be selfish and do something for you. because if you don't look after yourself, you will not be able to look after anyone else, whether that's your clients, your family or friends. So that is really important. I think from my own experience as well, listen to your body. If you're tired, if you've got headaches and you're working, stop. Tomorrow's another day, start fresh. If you're unwell, don't battle through it. Again, walk away. Really listen to what your body is telling you, because I was ignoring what my body was telling me. And essentially what I did, I got into that red zone where I was so unwell that I was not able to recover. And my body was saying to me, stop, you can't do this anymore. So listen to your body, set those boundaries, be realistic in what you can do. You know, when you leave the office or you finish for the day, leave your work phone by your laptop. Do not look at it. That's it. You need to switch off. That's really important. I've talked about it earlier. Get enough sleep. Sleep's so important. Eat well. And holidays as well. How many lawyers do we speak to who don't maximise their time off, take all their annual leave, or take work with them whilst they're on annual leave? Seriously, we've got to make the most of that, because when I spoke to my counsellor in terms of going through the experience, she said, imagine like the traffic light system. We're in green, so we're well. Whenever we do the job that we do, we go into amber. So it's kind of, there's a form of stress, and you keep moving into amber. And then when you go on holiday, you move away from amber and you're going back into green. That's your opportunity to recharge. But if you just keep pushing, you go from green to amber and into red when you're seriously unwell. So I think certainly those are kind of tips I would give to the listeners, really, just based on the experiences I've gone through. But look, we only live once in life. Make the most of it. And I think a phrase that I've said before is that, you know, in terms of working long hours, working hard, you know, when you look back on your life, the people that probably remember those hours that you put in are your children or your family. It's not going to be your employers, really. They're not going to come back in 20 years' time and say, oh, thanks so much for doing that. So, you know, you can lead your life the way you want to lead it. But, you know, I'm telling you from my own personal experience, you know, have the right balance. You can be ambitious, you can have a really good career, but also have a good personal life as well, which is really important.
Just say on that, I don't think it's selfish to look after yourself. And I mean, I've got a young daughter as well, and you know, there's one thing about obviously feeling you're making time for the kids and the family, but when I'm with her, I want to be happy, cheerful Michael. I don't want to be stressed down, grumpy Michael who's got a lot on his plate. I want to have the best time I can with her. So I think if we can find a way that we can look after ourselves and you know, make a bit of time for ourselves, even if that means slightly less time with the kids or with the family generally, then we can have better quality time with them. But I understand exactly what Marc and then Laura were saying, in that you know, you do get a bit of dad guilt, you know. And if I'm going off to a race weekend or something, which I do on occasion, I'm leaving my poor Spartan widow of a wife, as she calls herself, with the kid and the dog, and you know, she's got a lot to juggle. But it's so important. And as Marc says, like, exercise isn't necessarily a solution for everyone. But one of the things that I put down was doing something that gets you into a flow state. Now Star Wars Lego is probably a bit too far for me. I hate Lego, but I did something recently I've never done before and probably won't do again for a while, but it really got me into a flow state of the whole time I was doing it, I was thinking of nothing but what I was doing. And it's going to sound really sad, but it was basically a jigsaw puzzle, and it was a Where's Wally jigsaw puzzle that I started doing with my daughter. And inevitably, she got bored within about 30 seconds of us starting, but I'd started, so I was carrying on with this jigsaw, and I spent hours doing it. I did not stop until it was finished. Yeah, and very sad as that is, it was raining outside, that's my excuse. I realised at the end of it that I thought about nothing else for the last couple of hours, apart from where the next tile was going or where Wally might be on this silly jigsaw. And I realised at the end kind of how calm I was. And I think that's so important. Now, it doesn't have to be Lego, it doesn't have to be a jigsaw, but if you can find something that you quite enjoy doing that just gets you out of your own head for a little bit of time, I think that's so beneficial.
Yeah, I agree, Michael. Actually, the big thing I started in COVID, and everyone teases me in work about it, is I ear read. So I don't really ever physically read a book anymore because I don't have the time. However, I'm a massive ear reader now, and I think I probably get through 3 books a month now, which
Oh, wow.
I never would. And you know, like Marc said, and like you said, Michael, I think what it has enabled me to do is I shut my brain off from work. And, you know, whether I'm doing it, I put my ear pods in, and I do it when I'm doing the house cleaning, and I travel over an hour to get to work. So I use that time, rather than to think about the stresses of my day, I switch off totally. And a bit like you're running, by the time I get home, I'm in a much better mood because I've taken myself into someone else's world, whether it be fictional or real. And I am a much, much calmer, nicer person when I get home, or even when I'm doing the chores around the house, because I remove myself from where I am. And it's really made a big difference to me in how I relax.
The imagery, meme, whatever you want to describe it as, that I've seen is about exhaustion, and that point that we go on holiday or we take a break when we're exhausted. Whereas actually what we should be doing is going on holiday or taking a break before we reach that breaking point so that we can recharge. Otherwise, we only recharge as far as, you know, just below breaking point, for the sake of argument. It's been a really instructive conversation, this, and I'm hugely appreciative of the contributions that you've all made. I know, Michael, you've got some final thoughts, some final pointers that you wanted to share as well.
Yeah, just a few bits that kind of I found have helped me. I mean, just on the holiday point, you do get a lot of pre and post holiday stress as well in this profession, probably in all professions, but certainly in this profession, that I'm going away for a couple of weeks, so everything needs to be finished and perfect before I go. And then you come back and you've got 200 million emails in your inbox, and everything has to be dealt with on the first day back. You know, and one of the things we do at my firm is we have a long run up to people's holiday. So we make sure, certainly when it's a longer holiday than a few days here and there, we make sure that everyone is talking about this person being away well ahead of time, and we're starting to get familiar with some of the issues on some of their files so that we're ready to pick up that caseload, and the stress is slightly less when they're away. The other rule that I have in my firm is that everyone has to take 2 weeks holiday every single year, every calendar year, and I insist on that, and I enforce it, and I take mobiles off and laptops off people to make sure that they are properly kind of switching off during that period. And one of my team said to me that she's never before been forced or you know, even heavily encouraged or even allowed in some cases to take 2 weeks off and properly switch off during that time. But you know, as we said, that's so important. I just wanted to mention before we really wrap up, you know, it's a well-known slogan, but it is good to talk. I think Marc mentioned this earlier, that talking to someone is really important. I had a bereavement a few years ago when I went to a therapist who really helped me kind of through that myself. And I think going through that experience as well also helped me in terms of when I'm helping my clients going through a similar sort of scenario. But I think the point I really wanted to make was talk to someone. If you know, if therapist isn't kind of quite what you feel you need, another option is there's a lot of people out there now. I think they call themselves mindset coaches. We've got one at Culver Law who I work with. I talk to my mindset coach every single week. He works with my team as well, and he just helps me get on top of my outlook on various things. And if things have stressed me during the week, I talk to him about it, and he tells me or gives me a few tips or a few bits I can work on to help me stop dwelling on the negativity from it, really. It would also be a bit remiss of us not maybe to mention Law Care. Law Care are a fantastic organisation that, you know, if you are feeling overwhelmed or stressed, you can call and get some advice from or some help from. You know, they understand the pressures of the profession, I think, and you know, they are a really good organisation. I'd encourage people to talk to. A few kind of other bits that have helped me. I mean, self-help books, whether it's Audible book or reading it, you know, really works. I think I've got a few favourites. So if I can name drop a few books, but some of these are quite old, but they really work, I think. And there's one of my favourites is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffs, and it's quite an old book now, but I think that's a really good one. There's a really good focus and message in that. There's one called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, which I think a lot of us are guilty of. We're always worrying about the future and we're never kind of present. And that's a very good book as well, I think. And there's one called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F, shall I say, by Marc Manson. That's a very good book, and it helps, I think, put things in perspective. And then Ant Middleton, kind of military guy, does a lot of these books as well on mindset. Like I think there's one called Mental Fitness. There's The Fear Bubble, Seronegativity, things like that are really quite good. Now, the only kind of slight limitation I have with self-help books is that I find them really, really helpful whilst I'm reading them or whilst I'm listening to them. But if I don't enact them or make a habit from it, a few weeks later I'm back to maybe where I was. So I make like endless amounts of notes on these things and refer back to it. Packing up the workstation, I think this is something certainly that's come in since COVID. We're still working from home maybe a lot more than we used to. It can be really difficult to get away from work. If you're lucky enough to have your own office at home, then great, you can kind of close the door on it. And how I mentally think of it is, when I'm in that room, I'm working. When I'm not in that room, I'm not. So if it's a work stress issue, I'll worry about it when I'm in that room. And it's kind of this space in my house that I hate going into almost when I'm having a tough time at work, because that's where the stress comes out. But it's narrow and it's limited, and I've shut the door on it. And it's kind of mentally shutting the door on it, I think, is really important. But obviously not all of us are lucky enough that we can have a study or a separate room we can work from at home. But what you can still do is pack up your work area, put your laptop away, like actually put it away, put it in a cupboard or get it out of sight, and like mentally symbolize to yourself that this is my time now. I'm no longer working. I'll stress and I'll worry about that when I'm back there. The other kind of thing I would stress is things like meditation or visualization. It's a little bit maybe out there for some people. It's something that I've tried and I struggle with a bit, but trying with my mindset coach to kind of implement this more regularly is spending a bit of time and focus each day in kind of meditation or visualizing. And a good kind of, I think, softer or halfway house alternative is breath work as well, like doing some breathing. It's amazing, when we're stressed, we almost hold our breath a lot more and won't realize it. Breath work and actually focusing on your breath can really, really help make you calmer and more kind of present, if you like. And Wim Hof is probably well known. I mean, maybe don't go jumping into frozen lakes, but ice baths are beneficial, of course, but maybe don't jump into frozen lakes. But his breath work, I think, is really, really good. It's a good, quick way of changing your focus and getting back into a calmer state. I like to think of myself as a constant work in progress. So I'm not perfect. I'm a long way from perfect. And that thinking of myself as always improving helps me get over my perfectionism and me thinking I have to be perfect and me being self-critical for the slightest thing, basically. I'm constantly thinking I'm getting better. And every experience I have is making me a better lawyer or a better dad or a better person or a better athlete, whatever it is. If you can look at experiences in life and think, maybe I needed those lessons to help me get better or to help me become a stronger person, whatever it was, and trying to like not make the same mistake twice by writing down what went wrong and maybe what you're going to do differently kind of in the future can help you stay in that work in progress kind of mindset. Prioritizing sleep is important, and there's lots of sleep habits. I could probably spend a whole other podcast talking about good sleep habits. Things like turning off the screens and getting away from screens and well ahead of bed is a very simple one. I mean, as lawyers as well, we do generally look at the negative, and we do dwell a lot on what can go wrong. And it's our job in a lot of cases, isn't it, to stop things from going wrong or to warn clients of the repercussions of things. And that can kind of stem into our personal lives as well. You're always looking at what could go wrong or what problem's going to arise around the corner. And there's an expression that, again, my mindset coach kind of has taught me that I like to think of a lot. And it's maybe the final thing I'll say. We don't experience life. We experience the part of life that we focus on. So I'll say that again. So we don't experience life. We experience the part of life that we focus on. I think that's so true. And for me, if it's not a good life, change the focus. Change the focus and it will become a good life. Hopefully that's helpful.
Well, if that's not a good place to finish, then I don't know what is. It's been fantastic to have you all on the podcast, and the thing I take away from today is going back to the point about taking action, exercising the mind as well as exercising the body. You know, the things that we've talked about today, they don't happen naturally in a lot of cases. You have to go out and make that effort. That's a real takeaway from my point of view. So thank you so much to you all for contributing to this special edition of the podcast. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much, David. That was great.
Thanks, Marc.
No, absolute pleasure.
Thank you to Laura.
Thanks, David.
Well, hopefully useful. Thank you very much indeed for listening in, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.